The B-1 Lancer was born in an era when the threat of nuclear war shaped nearly every military decision. The United States needed an aircraft that could break through advanced enemy air defenses and carry enormous payloads far into hostile territory. From the start, the program was seen as one of the most ambitious and costly undertakings in American aviation, and the path to fielding it was anything but smooth. The project faced multiple cancellations and revivals, and even after the bomber finally entered active service, many analysts still doubted whether it could truly deliver on its promise. But over the decades that followed, the B-1 Lancer repeatedly demonstrated its combat value, ultimately proving that the massive investment behind it was not wasted. So how did a bomber, once defined by delays, criticism, and uncertainty become one of the most important assets in the U.S. military inventory? The solution to these and numerous other challenges was intended to be a new American bomber that would be swifter and more formidable than the B-52 Stratofortress. With variable sweepwing technology, prototype velocities surpassing Mach 2, and the capability to operate at exceptionally low elevations, the B-1's configuration demonstrated decisively the United States' determination to triumph in the race against the clock. The Lancer had to penetrate to where the adversary simply wouldn't have opportunity to respond. But what happens when speed alone is no longer enough? When flying faster actually makes you easier to kill? But reality transformed faster than the engineers anticipated. The B-1's initial significant challenge was economic inflation, which caused the cost for a single platform to escalate from $40 million in 1970 to $70 million in 1975, and by 1977 had climbed to $100 million over a 20-year operational life cycle, compelling President Carter to re-evaluate the initiative. Additional fuel was also contributed to Carter's concerns by the U.S. Air Force's intensive development on its revolutionary stealth platform, the Advanced Technology Bomber ATB, which at that moment appeared far more viable than yet another bomber. Nevertheless, the decisive factor that terminated, albeit temporarily, the trajectory of the B-1, which had not yet reached production, was the circumstances with the Soviet defector aviator Victor Boleno, who escaped to Japan in his MiG-25 Foxbat in September 1976. During debriefing, he described the new Soviet Super Foxbat, which is almost certainly a MiG-31 Foxhound, fitted with a radar system capable of identifying and destroying targets from below to engage cruise missiles. This characteristic of the new Soviet interceptor would have rendered any U.S. platform operating at low elevation detectable and vulnerable to engagement. Consequently, the concern of survivability and the reality that the B-1's weapons configuration at that moment was comparable to that of the B-52 drove many policymakers and commanders to increasingly challenge the Lancer development initiative. For instance, Democratic U.S. Senator Edward William Proxmire consistently criticized the B-1, labeling it nothing short of an overpriced dinosaur. Defense Department leadership also seized every chance to publicly attack the B-1, asserting that the AGM-86 air-launched cruise missile ALCM launched from the force of existing B-52 Stratofortresses would provide the U.S. Air Force equivalent performance for breaching Soviet airspace. Eventually, in 1977, Carter declared the termination of the B-1A in favor of intercontinental ballistic missiles, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, and a force of modernized B-52s with the AGM-86 ALCM. But the B-1 was too exceptional to be abandoned so easily. Therefore, with the administration of President Reagan, the choice was made to acquire both the B-1 and the Advanced Strategic Stealth Bombers of the ATB initiative. In the winter of 1982, the U.S. Air Force granted Rockwell 2 agreements totaling $2.2 billion for the engineering and manufacture of 100 B-1 bombers, and development resumed. Granted, the architecture of the original B-1 was not without modifications, as it had to be adapted to the anticipated missions. The outcome was a modified B-1B with a decreased maximum velocity, which enabled the variable aspect ratio air intakes to be substituted with simpler fixed geometry ones. This substantially diminished the B-1B's radar cross-section, a worthwhile compromise for the reduced velocity. The B-1B emphasized high subsonic velocities at low elevations, raising the original Mach 0.85 to Mach 0.92, with the converted B-1 achieving a maximum velocity of Mach 1.25. A distinct point of significance was the expansion in maximum takeoff mass from 395,000 pounds for the B-1A to 477,000 pounds for the B-1B. Naturally, no one was overlooking the B-1's confrontation with the Soviet MiG-31's radars and their Zaslon radar infrastructure. To address this, the Lancer's electronic countermeasure suite was extensively upgraded. In 1986, the B-1B officially joined service with the Strategic Air Command (SAC) as a nuclear bomber, and by 1988, the U.S. Air Force had received all 100 platforms. However, with the dissolution of the USSR, the Cold War concluded, and the global nuclear confrontation scenario for which the legendary Bone was engineered remained a mere matter of planning documentation. In 1992, it was transferred to Air Combat Command and reconfigured to conventional strike missions, completely eliminating its nuclear mission by 1994. The 1990s were generally challenging for the B-1. The platform was quite sophisticated and costly to operate, and at that moment had no defined purpose. But simultaneously, combat itself was transforming. Strikes became more selective, and the capability to deliver substantial quantities of munitions to a designated area and persist over it became more critical. The B-1 proved to be perfect for all these missions, even though its original intent was completely different. The bomber's first trial was the operation against Yugoslavia in 1999. During the Allied force operation, heavy bombers executed a mission that would have been difficult to anticipate even 10 years prior. While executing only a limited fraction of all combat missions, they provided a substantial portion of the total volume of ordnance released, deploying from extended distances and minimizing the burden on forward installations. For the B-1, this moment was a watershed. The platform was finally confirmed as a conventional strike platform capable of executing missions previously considered the domain of tactical aviation. Simply stated, Kosovo had demonstrated that leveraging range and capacity can have a strategic effect even in a limited engagement. In Iraq, Lancers evolved from precision attacks to systematic deployment in a major operation. During Operation Iraqi Freedom, the bombers functioned as mobile armories capable of engaging dozens of objectives in just one mission. A distinctive characteristic of the B-1 was its capability to patrol for extended periods and rapidly respond to any developments in the circumstances. With ground formations rapidly advancing, this transformed the platform into a vital support component, reducing the interval between target identification and engagement. This is where the B-1 established its reputation as the U.S. Air Force's long-range strike workhorse. But the very missions that made the B-1 indispensable were also quietly wearing it out, raising a question the Air Force couldn't avoid forever. During the conflict in Afghanistan, the mountainous landscape, remoteness of the theater, and limited infrastructure made the mission of long-range aviation, and the B-1 in particularly in demand. It was increasingly deployed not as a classic strategic bomber, but as a means of close air support for forces. It circled over the combat zone for hours, which meant almost constant fire support for the personnel on the ground and the capability for the command to resolve problems without deploying large air forces to forward installations. General John P. Jumper, the Air Force Chief of Staff, provided one example of the new methodology to the work of the Air Force bombers. A combat air controller in Afghanistan transmitted adversary coordinates to a B-52 bomber at 39,000 feet, which then released laser-guided munitions on a target just 1,000 feet in front of friendly forces. That's the effect of close air support. Jumper stated, "You didn't see the airplane or feel the heat from the engines, but the precision was even better than what we were able to do in Vietnam." This experience proved unique in many aspects. A strategic bomber designed for a nuclear attack against a continental adversary found itself integrated into the tactical chain of contemporary warfare, working closely with UAVs, reconnaissance, and forward air controllers, thereby completely dissolving the boundary between strategic and tactical aviation. Libya in 2011 further demonstrated the versatility of the Lancer force. They executed long-range missions delivering precision attacks against adversary air defenses and command installations. The operation demonstrated that the B-1 is capable of deploying autonomously, depending solely on its own range, refueling, and firepower. The final major phase of the B-1's combat trajectory was Syria, where the bombers were increasingly deployed as carriers of long-range precision weapons operating outside the range of adversary air defenses. But simultaneously, the constraints of the device's capabilities became apparent. Its intensive deployment in real combat environments greatly accelerated the deterioration of the airframe. Maintenance became increasingly costly and labor-intensive, and engineering solutions justified during the Cold War era were increasingly unsuited to the demands of the 21st century. At the beginning of the 2000s and 10s, the B-1 was severely lacking reliable digital communications, proper tactical picture sharing, cockpit ergonomics, and quick diagnostics for all systems. To close this deficit, in 2012, the U.S. Air Force launched an 8-year modification of the Integrated Battle System, IBS, which combined 3 upgrades simultaneously. Fully Integrated Data Link (FIDL) provided electronic data exchange and eliminated the requirement for manual entry of information between systems. The Vertical Situational Display Unit (VSDU) replaced the existing flight instruments with multifunction color displays, the second of which assisted with threat avoidance and target acquisition, and also served as a backup. And the Central Integrated Test System, CITS, a new diagnostic system that enabled the B-1 crew to monitor more than 9,000 platform parameters. Other updates included the replacement of 2 spinning mass gyroscopic inertial navigation system with ring laser gyroscopic systems, and a GPS antenna, replacing the APQ-164 radar with a scalable agile beam radar, Global Strike Sabre GS, active electronically scanned array, and a new orientation indicator. In the late 2000s, the B-1 acquired new fangs, while the IBS is the platform's intelligence. The long-range anti-ship missiles LRASM take on a new mission. The delivery of the first production AGM-158C LRASM from Lockheed Martin to operational units of the U.S. Air Force has brought the system to early operational capability on the B-1B. Now it was perceived not only as a land platform, but also as a vehicle for long-range anti-ship attacks. This would be especially valuable in any future high-intensity battles with China in the Pacific. In the autumn of 2023, Dyess Air Force Base unveiled the first modified B-1B as part of the B-1 Embracing Agile Scheduling Team Beast program, marking a new era of combat effectiveness for the venerable platform. The point of Beast wasn't so much the specific feature as the methodology to accelerate the implementation of any set of improvements on the aging force. While the platform is needed in service and before the window to the mass introduction of the B-21 Raider in the 2030s closes, while 2025 became the moment of truth for the installation of a new pylon from Boeing, which greatly expands the range of heavy weapons under the fuselage of the B-1B called Load Adaptable Modular LAM. The company has previously stated that the LAM can be configured to carry up to 7,500 pounds, but it's unclear exactly what limit the Air Force is targeting for Bone. In fact, this would open the door to the deployment of the advanced AGM-183 Air Launch Rapid Response Weapon, ARROW, hypersonic air-to-ground ballistic missile, as well as a whole class of 5,000-plus pound munitions. Comparing the B-1B Lancer with another legendary bomber, the B-52 Stratofortress, one cannot help but recognize that while the former is being upgraded to the point of being replaced by the B-21 Raider, the latter's in no hurry. On the contrary, it's being modernized so regularly and extensively as if it still has a long existence ahead. This is evident in the sheer scale of the initiative, such as the recent upgrade of the Stratofortress to the B-52J version, with new Rolls-Royce F130 engines. However, this doesn't mean that either of these giants is superior or inferior. They both accomplish what the times and current U.S. strategy require. The B-1B is all about velocity and volume, climbing quickly, flying far, and unleashing tons of precision-guided munitions on a target, departing before the window of opportunity closes. Its upgrades aren't an attempt to become a miracle platform, but rather a pragmatic refinement of a working instrument. The B-52 is like an old vessel with new engines and updated electronics. It's not pursuing youth, it's building on its service life. And its strength lies in the platform's stability and the fact that any missile sensor or new communication system can be integrated as if they were installed from the start. And here we arrive at the main concept. These two long-serving U.S. Air Force platforms live long, not because it's regrettable to decommission them, but because each of them remains valuable in its own way. One operates with today's conflict and today's tempo. The second one's preparing to operate tomorrow. And somewhere in the middle, the The B-21 is developing into the next chapter in the history of U.S. strategic bombers, to which one of the distinguished veterans is about to pass the baton. So here's the real question. When the next high-end conflict arrives, will the Air Force still rely on raw payload and speed? Or will survivability finally matter more than volume? Will the remaining 45 B-1s be retired by 2035? Or will necessity keep them flying well into the 2040s alongside the B-52? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want to understand how the B-21 is designed to replace both of these legends at once, make sure you're subscribed, because that story is already unfolding. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.